Adding some shading to the orange as well. And now on the Foxglove, I'm just adding a very concentrated mixture of ultramarine with a little bit of permanent rose. And then smoothing everything to look like there is a little bit of shading so they look more three-dimensional. Now I'm adding some branches to that rose bush, and I'm using just plain burnt umber with a liner brush so they remain very thin. We don't want the branches to overpower the roses. Now with a liner brush, I'm adding a little bit of dark grasses using very light movement with a very dark green. I'm just mixing a little bit of burnt umber with the hooker's green. And continue adding that, a light touch, making it round. You don't want your grass to look very straight because it looks kind of unnatural. And I'm doing the same thing on the other side, trying to vary the height so they don't all look like, you know, little soldiers lined up. You want them to be curved, and you want to vary the length. You want to keep it very natural. So the next thing I'm going to work on is the hydrangeas, and now we're going to add the details. So what I did here, I made a very concentrated mixture of a lot of permanent rose with a tiny little bit of ultramarine, and this is a heavy cream consistency. And I'm adding just kind of little dabs of paint with my size 0 round brush that is just going to create the illusion of all the tiny little flowers that form the hydrangea. Now making sure that I don't completely obliterate the color that is underneath, we want to still see that lighter value underneath. So just keep using the very tip of the brush. Make sure you're wiping the brush on the side of the palette every time you load so you remove the excess paint. You don't want to go to the paper with a fully loaded brush because all of that paint on such a small area would just bleed all over. So you want to have control, and you can control that by removing the excess paint, by wiping it on the side of the palette, and even dabbing slightly on the paper towel if you need to remove the excess paint. And that comes with trial and error, and you can always quickly use a paper towel to dab paint if you apply too much, or you can use the thirsty brush technique where you rinse the brush and wipe it on the paper towel to remove all of the water, and then touch the wet paint, and the brush is going to work like a little vacuum cleaner to remove that excess paint. Now a little bit of dark green to make the foliage in the back darker. And finally, I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow gouache, and I'm gonna use that very concentrate. I'm only adding a teeny little bit of water to make the gouache a little more workable. And I'm adding little dots of yellow, which emulates that little yellow center that each of the hydrangea flowers has. Just a little detail to make it pop a little bit more. Now gouache can be hard to work with if it's straight out of the tube, and that's why I added a tiny little bit of water just to make it creamy and workable. Now with a white gel pen, I'm adding some details to all of the flowers, just some highlights. You could very easily use white gouache if you prefer, but the gel pen just makes it so much easier, and that's why I prefer. And I had one in hand, so why not? But feel free to use white gouache. Now with all of those little white details added, I just feel that I need a little bit of a dark detail on the foxglove, so I'm just adding tiny little bit of plain ultramarine, very concentrated.